we're ready for you to go ahead and take the helm there, Ron.
All right, so you know, Joe, I don't have any a PowerPoint or anything, but you can put the bill up if you want.
Oh, okay.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Central North American Region 4 NSS Director out of St. Louis. I'm also I also work for Boeing, the Boeing company here in St. Louis. Of course, here in St. Louis we build airplanes, not spacecraft. But most of my career has been in, or half of it anyway now, has been in space. I should have told Ami, I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, actually Sunnyvale. But most of my family's moved out and they've moved to the Sacramento area now. So they're a rep. Anyway, my earliest memory in life, just to kind of tell you where I'm coming from, was my dad taking me out and showing me, and I saw Sputnik, and I was 4 years old. And that changed my life. 4 years old. And it sparked a lifetime interest in astronomy, and that evolved very quickly into space as we moved into the space program. So I've now had a 50-year aerospace career, and it's been pretty fascinating. It began there in Sunnyvale, right next to NASA Ames. My first job, I was a NASA intern in high school. And then after high school, I became a NASA intern in college. So those jobs that I worked on, we don't have time to go into those now, but those were just fascinating, consequential jobs. After the second internship, I ended up working for NASA on the Kuiper Airborne Observatory, and because of my background in astronomy, and I ended up working the tracking system on this world's largest airborne telescope. So that was when I was about 20 through 25 years old. Of course, Kuiper is the successor to today's SOFIA, or a predecessor. Anyway, following NASA, I worked for about 15 years on the shuttle, on different aspects of the space shuttle, on the civil shuttle and on the military shuttle out of Vandenberg. I worked for Rockwell International down in LA, and Martin Marietta out of Denver. Martin, that's where I worked on the Slick 6 out of Vandenberg on the shuttle. And in 2011, I was working with a couple of small companies. I was deputy director of a program we flew payloads on the last 2 shuttle missions, professional and student payloads, up to the shuttle and to ISS. Most of the old timers that are listening in know me through my way back in the 90s when I was part of Rockwell. I created something called the Integrated Space Plan, and when I was in the Advanced Projects group there. And as I mentioned earlier, at the time we were working on the first space exploration initiative. So that was quite a time. And it was back then that I, through a weird series of events that we don't have time to go into, I started working with astronaut Buzz Aldrin. And basically Buzz had seen that integrated space plan on a wall at NASA, Houston, called me up out of the clear blue one day and said, hey, we got to get together. So that started a long-term relationship that exists today. At Buzz's direction, I moved to Washington, D.C. and request, I should say, after Challenger, when we all got laid off. That's another story, but we ended up, I ended up starting, I was vice president and first executive director of his nonprofit ShareSpace. So, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with ShareSpace, but back then, it was all about we were trying to accelerate the growth of commercial space, and at the same time create a citizen participatory space program. And this was all in the late 90s. And back then we were intimately involved in laying the groundwork for Dennis Tito for his first space tourism mission, laying the groundwork for for the space tourism industry today. So that's how I got kind of in a nutshell hooked up with Buzz. So over the years, we had it always bugged Buzz that July 20th wasn't a national holiday. So last year, when I was asked to run for the board, I was wondering, well, what can I do on the board of directors of the National Space Society? And so I got a call for Buzz one day, and this topic came up again. And I said, well, maybe it's time to do something about that. So this all started over a year ago. First thing I did was call up Mark Hopkins, who everybody on this line knows. Got a background on where the NSS stands on, July 20th is a national holiday. Basically, Mark said, if you can make it happen, we'll be 100% behind it. So I pulled together a team, and Janet, many of you know Janet Ivey of Janet's Planet fame, and a guy named J. David Baxter, who has been working for years to create space exploration days on a state level back in the 80s and 90s. He kind of stopped around turn of the century. But I got him. He was a wonderful resource because he had a website out there that had the history of all these, of everything that had been done to date. I studied that website and basically patterned a bill after what I thought was the best thing that had been done in the past. It was actually a bill that Ronald Reagan, the Reagan administration, had done, and so it didn't take too long. We put together the words for that for what is now HR 59. It was introduced on the House floor in early in June, and as I mentioned before, we immediately found Kendra Horn, who is the freshman rep out of Oklahoma, who is an International Space University graduate, thank God. And she said, "Oh, this is fantastic. We're going to make this happen this year before July 20th." So of course we said, "Oh, great, that's fantastic." I didn't believe it, but yeah. So she's found a number of supporters on the House side. So in the process of doing this, we learned that because this is an annual bill, we want this to be every year. We want this to be kind of celebrated. It has to come through the Senate side, through the Senate Judiciary Committee. So that's where we're focusing right now. Senator Ted Cruz, who is both space on the Senate side and he's a member of the Judiciary Committee. He's got the text right now, and they're looking at it. So once it comes through once it gets introduced on the Senate floor, that whatever text has happened on the House side gets superseded. So I should also say that this bill is not a paid holiday. This would be a day like Flag Day, and so it's impossible to get a paid holiday approved. So we think this is something that's very doable, and we're off to a good start. So that's where we're at today. The first congressman to support this was Jim Cooper out of Tennessee, who happened to be Janet Ivey's congressman. And as soon as we sat down with him, he loved it and agreed to sponsor it. So it's been going well. We've got it. It's introduced. Once we get it on the Senate, then I think it'll happen fairly quickly. So our focus in the near term is going to be get it out of the Senate and try to get this thing approved as soon as possible while we've still got some momentum going for the July 20th celebration.
Thanks, Ron. So I'm going to have to cut you off there.
I think I'm done.
All right, great job. And I don't think we're going to, unfortunately, have time for questions and answers, if you don't mind. If people have questions and answers, what's your email? In
right.
fact, if you
Yes.
got your chat window open, you can type it in there so people can see it.
I'll put my email in there, and also we have a website, spaceexplorationday.space, where you can go and see the bill, and there's some great history in there of how the bill came about. At least as of late last year, I haven't revised it this year because it's been an ongoing thing. And we've got some really great pictures out there of the from Apollo from the 60s, and we're putting that together.
Thank you, Ron.
Let me also say that we've also got, I mentioned earlier this, that I've created this integrated space plan. If people want to know more about that, go ahead and Google it. But we've got a new Kickstarter out that we just started last week, and it's going for another 3 weeks. We're revising the integrated space plan. And for those of you around the world that have never seen the integrated space plan, do look it up. It's basically an assimilation of all the elements, the requirements, the vehicles that need to be created to move humanity from Earth to actually migrating to a nearby star in the next 100 years. So it's kind of pulled it all together, and we're in the process of revising it. So look up our Kickstarter. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much, Ron.